guys. My name is Crystal Mills, and this is RMTV 2.0. This is our second episode. Still getting used to the hosting role, so this has been a challenge for me, and it's a lot of fun. But we have another very special guest today. Over the last 12 years, he's served as a lead catalyst and consultant to some of the nation's most recognized and established organizations and brands. He's an assistant professor of industrial technology at Roger Williams University, is the author of the upcoming book, Story Like You Mean It, and he's one of our keynote speakers at the Virtual Motion College Fair. There's a lot more that I can dig into for this intro, but I'm going to let him share his story. So please welcome Dr. Dennis Rebelo. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, you bet, Crystal. Like I said before we went live, I was looking forward to this chat all day. You know, it's my background is a little bit on the geeky side. Surprising, right, for a professor, right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
You know, but I was a physics kid, right? But I tripped into it by mistake, and you know, which is nothing to do with, you'd think, psychology or organizational behavior or industrial technology. And you know, as a professor of technology leadership and management at Roger Williams University, my focus is really to take both of my backgrounds, which is in humanistic psychology and organizational systems, and make sure that gets pressed into the classes I teach, because everything is a system and almost everything has a human, right? So when you think about it, whatever the class is, if it's organizational psychology, if it's human motivation, if it's designed for Lean Six Sigma, and it's more on the technical side, you always need to be able to accomplish understanding both. So, but my background as a physics guy is very connected to that. I was actually relatively sporty. I did like bicycle motocross, you know, like before the X Games and before it was a video game, right? And it was awesome. You know, I rode Diamondbacks and Hutch, and for old school folks on the horn or people who like vintage BMX bikes will know what I'm talking about. And I think that back then I kind of knew that I was so like an explorer, because it was a new thing, you know, and I looked at like jumping my BMX bike and racing it as a discipline, right? Like as a game, right? It was me in the game live, embodying some sort of like role, right? A racer. And I had to think about the sand, the viscosity or the water, the mud. I had to think about, like, I was really, you can tell I'm still a geek, right? So like, you know, and I was thinking about it and before our time here, and that has had a big influence, right, on how I shifted to something I think that was more complicated than BMX racing, physics, because I got really tied into like holography and holograms. And that helped me go to Brookhaven National Lab as a 16-year-old kid to look at radiation light rings and do all kinds of cool experiments with the United States Department of Energy. And I would represent my state, little state, Rhode Island, right? And there would be all these delegates from every other state in the United States. But then when I was at the University of Rochester, I said, wait a minute, the most complicated thing, back to my thing on systems and people, when there's work and there's people, right? You know, there's always going to be psychology. And that, right. And that's where things get flubbed up. I saw it in businesses that my family ran, or my, you know, families that I knew ran. And I was just fascinated, and like BMX riding and physics and my science fair project, I just dove in. And then I found the most fascinating thing, that people couldn't speak about themselves, right? Like of all these things, physics, BMX riding, all this stuff, like you can't, like when you ask an adult who's like accomplished the question, tell me about yourself, they flub it up. And even when I was interviewed by a media company that was related to the publisher, I said to the individual, who's very, very smart, like, so tell me about yourself. And she paused, you know, she really hesitated. And, you know, we played with it a little bit, and we used the peak storytelling system, which is offered in the book, Story Like You Mean It, as a method to reorganize her story. And so, you know, my background's about looking for complicated things, hacking them, and helping people live better because they feel better about who they really are, which is an identity thing, right? It's like my identity is this and this and this, but I just gave you a whole bunches of my life. I went from BMX rider, right, to physics guy, to professor, right, and to public speaking narrative dude. And so, but you know, by listening to my story, that it's all stitched together by a theme. And the theme is I want to help people. I'm motivated to help people. I like complications. I like hacking things. And I like developing systems. And see, it all makes sense that way. But if I didn't do it in a way that I just did it, you would say, like, I don't know about this dude. Or you probably even had an image of me when I came on board. And so, oh, you know, classic professor, you know, white dude, a little bit of gray on his beard from COVID days, doesn't shave as much anymore, you know, and you make up this image that guy's never worked a day in his life. He doesn't know anything about gaming, right? But now you think probably differently about me. So the beauty of a narrative that is self-told is that you start to recast an image that's more accurate as to who you are, the competencies that you have, your motivations, and how you actually have value and worth in the world. So I know that's a long answer, but how can I not story it up in return, right? Like, I got to do that.
I think it's a requirement.
It is. I'd get thrown right off the show.
No, and I think, like, for me in particular too, because, you know, I'm a very shy, I'm a very introverted person. And I think that's why I tend to gravitate a little bit more toward actual writing when it comes to storytelling. So like, if you had jumped onto this and you were interviewing me and you had just been like, hey, Crystal, tell me a little bit about yourself, I would have completely just collapsed. Like, it just does not work out well. So it's cool that you can jump in and say, you know, everyone has a story. We just have to figure out kind of, you have to be able to know how to voice it in the correct way to actually tell people who you are. So, you know, obviously you're talking about your book, Story Like You Mean It, and how you can kind of help people, you know, kind of traverse that area and figure out how to talk about themselves. But can you dive a little bit more into the book and tell us, you know, kind of how it's going to work, how it's going to help people do that?
So, yeah, absolutely. So the issue really becomes, so let's talk about what the issue is. The issue is you've had all these experiences in your life, right? In the book, we call them blue dots. So, you know, this is what the book looks like, right? It's being released on March 16th. And you have all these moments in your life that you have, and they vary in significance, right? You know, some are really important, some are moderately important, but your identity is based, the premise of the book, and there's a lot of research behind this, right? The whole PhD thing is that the premise is that if you explore, identify, explore, and examine your blue dot moments, which are really, we call them formative experiences in psychology. They're really impressionable on who you have become. If you look at them in your past, in your now, in your future, and you string them together properly, right? You can actually create that theme, and you actually feel better as a public speaker, even if you're a bit on the introverted side. You can, you start to say, well, wow, like my life is making sense, you know, which is why I was so excited to be invited, to the college fair, because when I think of Ritual Motion and what you're doing, you know, the work, like, so I'm going to answer the question in a roundabout way, just because I want to honor like the audience, right? And the audience is probably thinking, okay, like, why does this matter to me? That's cool, Doc. You've done these things. You're cool, kind of, but you're a little older now. And I got to tell you, like, how does this matter to me? Here's why it matters to you. If you're listening to this, watching this, you know, how many times have you been in a position where someone has said, so like you game, right? Like me, I studied physics, built a lab in my basement. There wasn't a lot of gaming going on, some really primitive Atari stuff back in the day, right? The very, very poor quality gaming. But what I realized when I look back at my life is that my ability to hack the system to organize my life helped me build a narrative that I could feed into when I'm speaking to people inside prisons, incarcerated folks, if I'm speaking to top cops or federal agents or former Navy SEALs, or if I'm speaking to top athletes and NFL people, nonprofit people, or NFL people that turn nonprofit leaders, right? Because, that's really popular. Folks go into the NFL, they might not be of celebrity status, but then they have to kind of figure out their life. So it's important, I think, because when you're gaming or doing sports in an E fashion, you're discovering so much about your skills to explore, to communicate, to make sense, to problem solve, and to have that narrative be like squelched or put in, like not released, is to deny yourself of the great value you have in all the work you've done to get ready for work in the 21st century, which is largely remote, as we know, amid COVID, but it's going to continue to be. So suddenly you know how to communicate, read people's cues, hear their voice, right? Be able to see visuals differently, multitask, pause. That's phenomenal. So there were probably moments in someone's gaming life, and so they had blue dot moments or hero experiences. We call them collaborative and then virtuous, and we can find those together, right, through the book, which is essentially a map of how to find these moments, with some good reading, so that you can, in between, to explain the context. So in the end, you can connect the dots of your life. And if you listen to any good speech, right, any good speech has had the speaker, herself, himself, themselves, tell part of their life. The greatest speeches. Think of Stephen Jobs at Stanford, his convocation speech, right, to Stanford graduates. This is after a near-death experience, founder of Apple. He told a story about dropping out of Reed College to drop in on calligraphy class. That was heroic because his birth mom said, I don't want you to, you have to get this kid educated if you adopt him, right? So his adopted parents spent all their money trying to get him to school. Then he said, the heck with it, he didn't want to go. So he started to explore. So it was heroic for him because he overcame the obstacle of feeling obligation. And then he went into the collaborative moment in the same speech and talked about how he founded with Stephen W. the company in a garage. That was collaborative. Collaborative is when you create something with another or help of others. And then he hit a virtuous moment where he fell in love with his work again when he established Next in Pixar. And when he told each dot, he was literally connecting the dots of meaning in his life. And his life made sense and he felt settled. And you could hear it, and you can hear it in his voice. When I first heard him follow the peak methodology that I had mapped out and researched and whatnot, I started to cry a little bit. My wife was like, her name is Shannon. She was like, what's wrong with you? And I said, well, everything I've been working on was just validated by Stephen Jobs in the best speech he's ever given to reframe his narrative. So if you show up ready to go, if you do the work, this book helps you find 9 dots in your life: 3 hero, 3 collaborative, 3 virtuous. Then you pick 3 to create your minimum viable story, which becomes your peak story that you can feed into college interviews, internships, job interviews. Even socially, you can start at low stakes. And when somebody says that, and you start to feel better, and psychologically, you're more integrated. You're like, look, I have these skills, I have these competencies and motivations, and we give you all the tools to do it. So if you like systems and maps and hacking your own life, or if you ever thought that you couldn't do it, now you can. And then it can help free you, liberate you to tell your own story.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think too, it's really cool, especially when you start to pinpoint that and put it into the hands of, a college student, someone who may not have a whole lot of experience. They may not have, or assume, or they think that they don't have a story to tell. I think that's awesome, because it's going to kind of, provide a little bit of a roadmap and be like, you do have a story, you do have something that you can tell people. Everyone does.
Everybody does. Now, you might not think it's a big deal, but it can really turn into a big deal because, just because I think it's interesting. So when you find a dot, we use this. It's called the story stamp. And it allows you to go in there and, you answer some questions, and you can find your mental muscles at the time of the blue dot or the formative experience. You can find your those are competencies. You can find your motivations and, the power of people and the power of place. And then you go through, and then you use this really cool thing called the 4 square. And that allows you to find out how to sort through those moments. And then we even have storytelling worksheet to look at those 9 dots and pick your favorite 3. But to your point on it, how old do you have to be? I've taught students who are 16, 15 years old. I had a student come from Cambodia to South Providence. She went through the program, and she ended up telling the Rhode Island Foundation her story. At the end of the class, she said, her name's Hannah Ung. And she said, hey, Doc, I just want to tell you, this was before I had the book. It was all digital tools and in a public speaking class. I told my story and I got a scholarship. And I was like, whoa, Hannah, tell the class, and everyone's like, oh, great. And she said, yeah, it's $20,000. I said, it's $20,000. It was sort of like second. She was almost like, it was like a second thought to her. And I said, that's phenomenal. She said, yeah, it's unrestricted. It can be used at any school. And I'm like, Hannah, hello. And she said, yeah, for all 4 years. I said, Hannah is an $80,000 scholarship.
Oh, wow.
like, because you honored these moments in your path, right, in a way that helped you showcase different um, mental muscles. Like, you were adaptable, you had self-leadership, you had all of these amazing competencies. But like a good lawyer on Law and Order or some other favorite show, you have to be able to consider how, as you introduce yourself, if you usher in a dot, a dot, a dot, then what it does is it's like a good case law, a good precedent, because it says, yeah, this is who I am and kind of why I matter, but it's not in a self-aggrandizing way, you know? So it like when Hannah told the story about coming from Cambodia to, you know, to or to Providence actually, and how she then went from Rhode Island to, well, she wrestled boys. She was a wrestler. And then, you know, how she learned English, and there were lots of bits to her story, but she knew the exact moment. So the other cool part about the book is it helps you zone in on not like, oh, like I used to be a BMX guy, or I used to, you know, be a physics geek, or, you know, I studied, you know, laser beams like I used to, right? You know, and, you know, it goes to one moment. Now, for me, just to kind of bring it home here, when I look back on my life, I can tell you that the reason why I won the science fair projects for the state, you know, both years, and went on these great adventures in the summer because of that, I think it was because there were a lot of smart people that I met across my life. But I knew how to convey it or teach what I learned, but I did it kind of intuitively. I didn't do all the research I have done since then on narrative identity and social identity and formative experiences and psychosocial matters and motivational theory. So like, what's cool about this is that like, you could be 15, 16, you could be 12, 13. You might not have as many experiences as a 60 or 70 or 80-year-old, but you can follow the method. And it could be that you went through divorce, or one of your parents I had one person say, hey, you know, I was a daughter of a Navy officer, and I had to go to a different community all the time. So I learned to be flexible. And by being flexible and open, I learned to respect people. And that helped me find that I actually cared about people's lives. She became a nurse, stayed away from carcinogens her whole life, and ended up with lung cancer, which, as a non-smoker. So now she tells her story as a lung cancer advocate survivor to help free up research money for lung cancer. That's a phenomenal narrative, right? But if you just heard, hey, you know, I'm alive because of targeted therapies or something, you wouldn't honor her whole path of life. And so what's really wonderful about it is that she's even more motivated to be a research advocate in lung cancer. Her name is Gina. She has a phenomenal narrative. And every time I think of her, I get more excited. And so for me, selfishly, every time somebody grabs the book now, I get to hear about their story, I get excited because I can see their value in the world. And isn't that what we all want, to be valued? Mm-hmm. You know, and we're going to change, right? Like, your blue dots are going to change. You're going to keep living and collecting more blue dots. So it can become a philosophy for organizing your life, right? So that you start to think about your life differently, and you can be like living a beyond an engaged life because you're making sense of it. And in a world kind of devoid of philosophy, it gives you a philosophy for organizing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's super cool and it's super important too, especially, you know, for the college kids that we talk to, because, you know, for starters, you know, like we had already said, you know, they may not necessarily know what their story is or how to, you know, tell people that, or organize it. And two, though, it's like, you know, they don't necessarily know what those skills are. I mean, especially when you start thinking about esports, you know, how new it technically is, especially in the collegiate sense. And you see these students come in and they're like, you know what, I want to be in esports. I love playing video games. This is what I want to do. And you're like, well, you know, what do you want to do in esports? I don't know. I have no idea. I just want to be in esports. And, you know, it's cool because that passion is there. That's, you know, it's a foundation. But I think when you also start getting into the point where you start organizing these thoughts, you start developing this narrative, be like, you know, I really want to compete in esports, but my parents don't fully understand it. So I don't really know how to, you know, move forward from here. How I can see you. I can see you, David. I can see you. So how would your book, how would your help
Yeah,
essentially, like,
this is
yeah.
great. This is so great. Like you're just like so good at this. So one of the coolest things that I've heard just in a long time just came out of your mouth, which is how to sell your parents on the thing that you really want to do, right? Because and have evidence, right? Like if you're playing a game, right, esports or just another genre of gaming, you're not making up the results. There's evidence in what you did. There's a score, there's a progression, right? And there are experiences that are informing you how to redo that next time you're faced with a similar something. So you're constantly using an apparatus in your brain to organize, right? But so the cool part with anyone who's in gaming, right, sport genre or non, is that you understand this because you do it all the time. Now imagine that you have a new apparatus that's even clearer that allows you to organize your story so that beforehand you think about the audience, but you have to build the story. You have to find the dots, build the story, and then it's the go-to. And it's just like anything. The more times you go to the obstacle and you lose, or you do okay, the quicker you eventually get through it. You actually spend less energy from a neuropsychological standpoint on that problem because you're already aware of it. Right. You're already aware that what's going to happen. So there's less stress. And actually, you don't have to over focus on the wrong thing. You're thinking of the right thing. So when you go to tell your story, you don't over focus on the thing that your parents are going to probably say that's going to make you say game over. Right. What's going to happen is I should make a funny noise, but I don't even know what to make because my gaming days are so gone. Right. Like I got to up my skills for a student who wants to tell her story or their story, what they can actually make sense of it. And your parents can't really like do anything other than honor you because if you do the work, your story is just going to stand out. It's going to be like, well, of course, she should be going there. They should be going there. He should be doing this. He made a really good point. And I see that a lot with parents. I see parents, whether their kids are students of mine or even students that I teach that are young in their low 20s and high teens that are in the Navy, they'll send me notes like months afterwards saying, hey doc, like I used it on my, my report up in the, my superior officer, my commanding officer. And I told a story, even though it's not apparent, and they listened to me for the first time. So like whether you're in the Navy or it's your parent and it feels like you're in the military in your house, you can tell your story to be heard. And I think that's one of the best gifts because self-expression and doing something meaningful like with your life is key. Now, I want to bring up one other point. You said something that was really powerful. You say a lot of things pretty quickly. I have to pay attention. You said, you might not have, like, you might want to go into esports, but when you go into these esports, it's like the glow of it that kind of makes you feel like, oh yeah, I should do it. Right. Like I should do it. Like my niece wanted to be like a forensic psychologist because she watched a lot of TV shows that way. Right. And, it was nice, but no one ever had the conversation with her, or she didn't figure it out herself that maybe that's not the thing that she should be doing. Now, I'm not saying that you waste a lot of years of your life, but why waste any time doing the thing that you want to do if you can figure it out earlier? And what students can do when they use this peak storytelling method is that they can hack themselves again, but in respect to the original thought. They can go back and say, hey, wait a minute, I don't think I'm going to do esports, but what I might want to do is be a graphic designer or an animator or influence the aesthetic around the lived experience of gaming. Because really that's what kind of drives me to gaming. It's or invent new methodologies to create communities in gaming, right? So there are different genres. And I say this in the book a little bit about dogs. When you look at people and you look at dogs, I was trying to explain psychological archetypes, and I did it, of course, but like there are archetypes. Like you could be a warrior, you could, this from gaming, right? You could be a warrior, a hero, you could be an innocent, you could be a sage. Think of Star Wars, think of Lucas's work, right? And like Yoda, he's a sage, he knows things. Your story can be just like a Netflix or Amazon series can be in a genre, just like a game, right? Can be in a genre. Your story can be in a genre. Now, you could be a warrior caregiver. You could be a tireless advocate for social justice. But the way I cracked it down in the simplest way is to say, like, look, think about an archetype or a characterization of you, like, or of any person, like you look at a dog. When you look at a dog, you don't see dog. What you actually see is a type of dog, not a collection of cells, but a type of dog, and a type of dog with particular traits. A Doberman on the beach the other day in Rhode Island, I'm with my puppy Australian Shepherd. I kind of stay away because that dog has a reputation for being a particular way. And that's how we understand how to orient ourselves to dogs. Plus, it was pulling the shoulder of the owner like crazy. I said, this is nuts. But that informs us. We see, right? We live in the physical world. So when someone hears your story and you're activating visuals, you actually can get them to see you. Like, and when you say people have, you've seen German Shepherd people, right? You've seen, Labradoodle people, right? You've seen Labrador people. You've seen Australian Shepherd people, highly energetic, purposeful, smart. So sometimes it like some tricks I offer in the book is like, think of people and their story as like, what dog are they? And so as you fashion your narrative off of real blue dots, can you start to feel connectedness or like Gorilla Glue kind of theming out, like holding together those dots over time so that there's like internal consistency to your story. And when that happens, then, it's powerful. For you as a speaker, you tend to drop your voice. You're more calm. You don't breathe as rapidly. Right? Rollo May, the psychologist, said it's an ironic and unfortunate habit when people lose their way. He didn't mean in public speaking, but just in general. They tend to speed up. And we see that like when kids get in trouble in the movies. So the greatest part about this isn't just that you kind of make sense of it for yourself. That's pretty great. But that you get to see, feel, hear, and be more calm in your representation of who you are when the tell me about yourself question or tell me what you want to do question shows up in an interview, in an internship, at home, around a Zoom call, right? When someone says, I see all your experiences, the school you went to, you want to get into, tell me about yourself. Because all the other stuff they can figure out, they want to hear it. Mm-hmm. They want to hear it. And to the extent that you can embody that story, right, that you can actually represent it well and with comfort, it actually adds another layer of resonance, which makes it really attractive.
God, I feel like we could go on and on for forever. It's so fascinating and interesting, and I've had an awesome time. I think I'm gonna have to cut it off, otherwise this is gonna be the longest episode in the history of episodes, which would also be great. But
I appreciate it. You ask great questions. It's wonderful. I look forward to sharing the secrets of storytelling to the population gathering for the college fair. And I'm excited. I think we're going to do some really unique giveaways too. We're going to game it up a little bit. We'll have some, I guess, Easter eggy kind of things happen so people can really enjoy the experience. And one last bit from just to know, March 16th to March 20th, the e-version of the book, which is normally like $9.99, my publisher has agreed to drop it to 99 cents for students so that they have there's no way they can't get it if they have an active Amazon account. And these are $20 and the hardcover are $30. But if you want the e-version, it's a great time from March 16th to March 20th. And we're giving away $5,000, $1,000 scholarships over the next year for storytelling that's captured on Instagram. We want to honor the stories, and we want to give you a little bit of dough to help with those books, right? And all of the other expenses, unrestricted. So Crystal, thanks so much for welcoming me.
Yeah, no, thank you again for taking your time to do this. There's a lot of opportunity for everyone watching to get in and start telling their own stories.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We have so many incredible things planned. The college fair is coming up. I'm also going to make sure all of the information for Story Like You Mean It is in the description below. So make sure you check that out. And until next time, we'll see you then. Bye, guys.